The 16th of December, 1944. The Ardennes Forest. Private First Class. Thomas Randall crouched in the biting cold, his breath forming ghostly clouds that instantly dissipated into the vast, freezing night. The distant, thunderous rumble of German artillery had, for the past hour, fallen into a deceptive silence, a silence that, to Randall's hunter-trained instincts, concealed a far more immediate and intimate danger: the methodical movement of night patrols slinking through the dense, snow-laden forest. Randall's unit, a section of the legendary 101st Airborne Division, had been issued clear and rigid orders: maintain fixed positions and conserve every precious round of ammunition. The standard protocol for this weather and time of night was unambiguous: limited engagement after dark. Visibility 0, the fragmented radio reports from command had declared. Hold positions until daybreak. Yet Randall harbored a vital, dangerous piece of knowledge that his commanders, 5 miles back in a warmer command post, did not. For the last 3 weeks, he had been secretly working on a contraption, a modification to his standard-issue sniper scope that violated every regulation in the field manual, from Article 118 on the alteration of government property to the unwritten code against unnecessary tinkering. Using salvaged parts from a wrecked American aircraft, a large, heavy flashlight battery taped roughly to the stock, and a handful of dull, phosphorescent paint he had painstakingly scraped from abandoned German equipment, likely a downed fighter's instrument panel, Randall had created what his fellow soldiers, with a mixture of mockery and wary curiosity, called his owl eyes. It was a crude, jury-rigged but startlingly effective night vision enhancement that allowed him to detect thermal signatures through his M1903A4 sniper scope. The potential penalty for such an unauthorized modification was severe: disgrace, demotion, and even a court-martial for sabotage. But as Randall's owl eyes scope detected minute, shimmering disturbances in the cold air, revealing the faint, shifting thermal signatures of human bodies moving 300 yards ahead, German reconnaissance units probing for weaknesses in the thinly held American line, he made the silent decision that would shatter his career, save hundreds of lives, and, in a small but critical way, alter the course of the battle and possibly the entire campaign. "I can see them," Randall whispered, the words freezing instantly on his lips. His voice was low, taut with suppressed excitement and dread. "They're moving toward Baker Company's position, at least 20 men." His spotter, Corporal James Winters, a hardened veteran of Market Garden whose eyes were useless in the absolute blackness, shook his helmeted head in immediate, reflexive rejection. "You can't possibly see anything in this darkness, Tom. Command said to hold fire. It's a waste of ammo, and it gives away our position." In that infinitesimal moment, the world narrowed for Randall to a single critical choice: obey orders and allow a massacre, or disobey the direct chain of command and risk everything, not just his life, but his future, to save hundreds of sleeping American soldiers from being slaughtered in their shallow, freezing foxholes. He knew the German units were using the blanket of darkness to infiltrate the American positions before launching their massive counteroffensive at dawn. With trembling yet mechanically steady fingers, he adjusted the rough homemade device and settled his eye into the cold rubber eyepiece, aligning his crosshairs on the invisible enemy. Thomas Randall was born on April 12, 1923, in Clearwater, Minnesota, a small farming community where winter temperatures routinely plunged to 30 degrees below zero. His childhood was not marked by grand military tradition, but by the quiet, demanding discipline of the hunter. He was the youngest of 4 children, and his greatest education came in the frozen woods, tracking white-tailed deer with his father, William Randall. These hunts often took place before dawn or after dusk, the precise moments when the animals were most active. By age 12, Thomas could track and shoot a deer in near-total darkness, developing an almost preternatural ability to detect movement in low-light conditions, relying on subtle thermal variations and peripheral vision. His father, William, carried a deep cynicism about warfare, a legacy from his service in the brutal trenches of World War I. "War is nothing but waste," he would tell his sons with a quiet, weary intensity. Men dying for ground that doesn't matter, following orders from officers who can't see what's actually happening on the front line. Despite this powerful warning, when Pearl Harbor was attacked, Thomas enlisted immediately. Unlike his father's distant, pointless war, Thomas believed this conflict had a clear, undeniable moral purpose. During basic training at Fort Benning, Georgia, Randall's marksmanship scores were the highest in his company. His drill instructor, Sergeant Maxwell, recognized the unique, almost intuitive nature of his talent. "Most men shoot where a target is," Maxwell noted in his evaluation report, a line that would prove prophetic. Randall shoots where a target will be. This uncanny predictive ability, combined with exceptional patience, steady hands born of years in the freezing air, and a meticulous attention to external factors like wind and temperature, made him a natural, if challenging, candidate for sniper training. In sniper school, Randall's unusual background became both a formidable asset and a major liability. His extensive hunting experience gave him a profound advantage in fieldcraft, camouflage, and survival. However, his fierce independence and pragmatic nature made him deeply resistant to rigid military discipline. He frequently questioned instructors about standard-issue equipment, suggesting modifications based on his civilian experience, taping down loose metal parts, adjusting sight mechanisms, or using different cloth for better camouflage patterns. This earned him the nickname Professor among his peers, a term that carried a sting of mockery alongside grudging respect. "The kid can shoot," his marksmanship instructor reported, sighing, "but he doesn't understand that war isn't hunting. In war, you follow orders, you use standard equipment, and you do not improvise unless you are ordered to." Randall struggled profoundly with this philosophy. In hunting, adaptation and improvisation were virtues, the difference between coming home with game or an empty bag. If something didn't work, you fixed it. If conditions changed, you adjusted. The military's rigid adherence to protocol seemed not just bureaucratic, but actively counterproductive, especially when lives were on the line. Nevertheless, he graduated in the top 3 of his class and was assigned to the 101st Airborne Division in September 1944. His integration into the unit was rocky. Most of the men were veterans of Normandy and Market Garden, viewing replacement troops with suspicion, particularly specialized snipers who hadn't yet proven their mettle in sustained combat. Randall's incessant habit of tinkering only deepened the suspicion. "Here comes the professor with another one of his crazy ideas," became the common, weary refrain when he approached his squad leader with a suggestion. His immediate superior, Staff Sergeant Miller, was the embodiment of institutional resistance. "The Army has spent millions developing this equipment," Miller would sneer. "You think you know better than the entire United States Ordnance Department?" Randall would often offer the simple, frustrating reply, "I know what works in these specific conditions," a response that never endeared him to the chain of command. By December 1944, Randall had participated in several combat operations, distinguishing himself with 13 confirmed enemy kills. His accuracy was becoming legendary, but his methods remained fundamentally unconventional. He preferred operating alone or with a single spotter, often choosing exposed positions that, while tactically superior for a field of fire, violated the doctrine of protected cover. He experimented with camouflage techniques not taught in training, incorporating local Belgian moss or unique snow patterns that better match the specific terrain. These successes earned him the grudging respect of the riflemen, but continued deep skepticism from officers who saw his innovations as potentially dangerous, untried departures from tested standard tactics. What no one knew, not Winters, not Miller, not the officers, was that Randall had been working on his most radical, most dangerous modification yet. The P-47 Thunderbolt he had scavenged from, a victim of flak days earlier, had provided the heavy battery and the structural metal. The phosphorescent paint, scraped from a German instrument cluster, contained trace radium, giving it a persistent, faint glow. He had spent countless hours in the dark, cold nights carefully arranging layers of salvaged materials, using medical X-ray film as light filters to reduce the spectral light and enhance the subtle thermal contrast. The ultimate result, his owl eyes, was a crude piece of optical engineering that violated at least 7 regulations regarding standard issue equipment, yet it offered him a glimpse of the tactical future. The Ardennes offensive, later christened the Battle of the Bulge, represented Adolf Hitler's final, desperate, all-or-nothing attempt to split the Allied forces and force a negotiated peace before the inevitable collapse. The German military assembled 25 divisions, approximately 250,000 men, for a massive surprise assault through the dense, hilly Ardennes forest in Belgium and Luxembourg, a sector Allied commanders considered impassable for a major armored thrust, especially in winter. The American forces holding this sector were critically spread thin. Inexperienced divisions had been placed there to gain combat experience in what was called a quiet sector. When the offensive launched on December 16, 1944, with a massive artillery barrage, the Americans were caught completely by surprise. Poor weather grounded Allied aircraft, eliminating their crucial air superiority. Fog and snow limited visibility, allowing German units to advance undetected. The 101st Airborne Division, Randall's unit, received emergency orders while refitting in France and was rushed to Bastogne, a critical road junction. By December 19th, German forces had encircled the town. The division commander, Brigadier General McAuliffe, organized a perimeter defense, but the situation was dire. They were outnumbered by nearly 3-to-1 and low on ammunition, medical supplies, and winter clothing. It was a siege defined by freezing temperatures and desperation. In this context, night operations became critically important. The Germans, desperate to seize Bastogne before Allied reinforcements could arrive, conducted extensive skilled night patrols to probe for weaknesses. Standard doctrine for both sides mandated limited engagement after dark without specialized night vision equipment, which would not be widely deployed until decades later. The orders were strict: conserve ammunition, report enemy movements, and avoid engagement unless directly attacked. These orders made logical sense given the technology. Firing blindly was wasteful and dangerous. But they handed the strategic initiative entirely to the Germans, who used the darkness to maneuver with relative impunity. For Randall, these restrictions were beyond frustrating. They were an abrogation of tactical responsibility. His pre-war experience screamed that darkness was the ultimate advantage to the hunter who knew how to use it. He had spent the last week refining his device, perfecting the necessary focus and the compensation for the extreme cold. The question had now boiled down to this: would he be permitted to use his solution, or would he have to disobey a direct order to prove its absolute necessity? The temperature had plunged to 7 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit as darkness fell on December 20th. Randall and Corporal Winters were positioned on a wooded ridge overlooking a shallow valley. Their orders were explicit: observe and report, do not engage. Battalion headquarters was 5 miles back, and the radio was an unreliable sputtering box of static. At 1900 hours, Randall detected the first signs of movement. Unlike other snipers who relied primarily on sound, the faint crunch of boots in the snow, Randall had been systematically scanning the valley with his modified scope. The device was crude yet miraculous. Using the phosphorescent paint and the salvaged filters, he created a system that, while not true night vision, generated a distinct, faint glow whenever a warmer body moved against the colder background of snow and trees. The effect was amplified by the small, battery-powered ultraviolet light source mounted alongside his scope, cannibalized from a signal lamp. The faint, barely visible purple glow it emitted was a risk, but the reward was the ability to see thermal contrast in near-total darkness. "I've got movement," Randall whispered, his voice vibrating with certainty. 11 o'clock, approximately 300 yards, a column of men moving slowly up the ravine. Winters, staring uselessly into the black void through his standard binoculars, was deeply skeptical. "Are you sure? I don't hear anything." "They're being careful. moving 5 meters, then stopping to listen. Classic infiltration technique, Randall continued, tracking the nearly invisible figures. I count 23 personnel. They're carrying something heavy, probably machine guns or mortars. Winters grabbed the radio, desperation overriding skepticism. I'll report it. Baker Company needs to know. After 3 attempts, a faint, tinny voice responded, Lightning 6, this is Baker Actual. Report unreadable. Say again, over. Winters spoke slowly, deliberately. Baker Actual, this is Lightning 6. Enemy patrol, approximately platoon strength, moving toward your position from the northeast ravine. Estimate they will reach your perimeter in 30 minutes. Over. The response was immediate, predictable, and soul-crushingly frustrating. Lightning 6. Maintain observation. Do not engage. Repeat, do not engage. We have no confirmation of enemy movement in that sector. Flares report negative visibility. Hold position and continue monitoring. Out. Winters slammed the radio down with a quiet, controlled curse. They don't believe us. Without visual confirmation from multiple sources, they won't wake the company. Randall continued tracking the German patrol. They were moving with practiced, efficient silence, clearly elite troops. At their current quickening rate, they would reach the sleeping American company in less than 20 minutes. Baker Company's defenses were focused on the main road, leaving the hidden ravine they were now using wide open. They'll be massacred, Randall stated quietly, the knowledge a heavy, cold weight in his chest. The Germans will be inside their lines before anyone realizes what's happening. I know, Winters said grimly, rubbing his face with a gloved hand. But orders are orders. We report. We don't engage unless directly threatened. Randall made a quick calculation. 300 yards. An extremely difficult shot in daylight, a near impossibility in darkness. With his modifications, he believed he could make it, but doing so would instantly reveal their position and invite massive artillery counterfire. Worse, it would be a direct, unforgivable violation of standing orders. They've got a radio operator with them, Randall observed, his voice a low monotone, and what looks like an officer leading the patrol. If I take them out, it might disorganize them enough to buy Baker Company time to wake up. Winters shook his head firmly, the voice of the manual speaking through him. Absolutely not, Randall. That's a negative. Breaking radio silence with unauthorized fire could compromise the entire sector. Every German artillery spotter for miles will zero in on our position. Randall was silent, his eye locked to the scope. The German patrol was now 250 yards away, moving with increased confidence. He could clearly see that several soldiers were carrying what appeared to be flamethrowers, weapons that would be devastating against the wooden bunkers where Baker Company had their command post. James, Randall said quietly, using his spotter's first name, a sign of the moment's final gravity. There are 217 men in Baker Company. If those Germans reach their position undetected, how many do you think will survive? Winters, a veteran of brutal, messy infantry combat, did not answer immediately. He had seen the swift, silent annihilation of units caught sleeping. Finally, his voice thick with resignation, he spoke. It's not our call to make, Tom. The chain of command exists for a reason. Because officers 5 miles behind the lines know better than the men who can actually see what's happening, Randall countered, the words an echo of his father's old bitterness. Through the scope, Randall could now clearly identify the patrol leader, a tall officer wearing the distinctive uniform of the Waffen-SS. The man moved with total confidence, occasionally consulting a map and giving crisp hand signals. This was not a random probe. It was a carefully planned operation targeting a specific, vulnerable objective. Winters tried the radio once more, desperation a sharp current in his voice. Baker Actual, urgent update. Enemy patrol has flame weapons and is now 250 yards from your northeast perimeter. Please acknowledge. Over. The radio remained silent for 30 seconds, then crackled with the same infuriating rejection. Lightning 6, maintain position. Visibility negative in all sectors. No confirmation of enemy movement. Out. Randall made his decision, final, unalterable. I'm taking the shot. Randall, don't. If I'm wrong, I'll face court-martial. If I'm right, he said, settling his cheek onto the frozen wood stock, Baker Company lives. He made minute, practiced adjustments to his scope, compensating for the distance, the wind, and the extreme cold's effect on ballistics. Target 300 yards. Wind confirmed 3 knots westerly. Temperature affecting drop by 2 inches at this range. Winters hesitated for a crucial beat, then sighed and raised his own binoculars, trusting his partner's sanity over his own eyes. I can't see a damn thing, but I trust your judgment. Officer, target 300 yards. Randall breathed slowly, controlling the violent hammering of his heart. The German officer had stopped to consult his map again, making him momentarily stationary, the perfect, unforgiving target. Through his modified scope, the thermal signature was clear, a human-shaped glow against the cold, dark background. He exhaled halfway and squeezed the trigger. The crack of his rifle shattered the profound silence of the night. Through his scope, Randall saw the German officer collapse immediately. Before the stunned patrol could react, Randall rapidly cycled his bolt and fired again, taking down the radio operator, eliminating both command and communication in 2 clean, devastating shots. The German patrol erupted in sheer, panicked confusion. Some men dove for cover, others fired blindly into the impenetrable darkness, and a few simply bolted back down the ravine. Without leadership or communication, their carefully planned infiltration dissolved into complete chaos and disarray. Randall continued firing methodically, each shot finding its mark despite the darkness. 8 shots, 8 kills. The Germans, unable to determine where the fire was coming from, or, more terrifyingly, how they were being seen in the absolute blackness, began to retreat in a desperate scramble. Across the valley, Baker Company had been violently shaken awake by the sound of the sniper fire and the immediate confusion in the ravine. Flares shot into the sky, illuminating the retreating Germans, who were now exposed in the open ground. American machine guns opened fire, cutting down the remaining patrol members. What had been an elite infiltration unit was now a scattered group of survivors fleeing for their lives. Winters was already breaking down their position, the fear of incoming fire a powerful motivator. We need to move immediately. Every German artillery unit in the sector will be zeroing in on this location. Randall quickly disassembled his rifle, carefully preserving the modified scope. Baker Company is alive because we broke the rules, he said, the adrenaline beginning to subside into a cold, profound exhaustion. Baker Company is alive because you're the luckiest shot in the European theater, Winters countered, his tone a mix of relief and terror. Or the craziest. Let's move before we find out which. They had barely cleared the ridge when the retaliatory German artillery began pounding their former position with furious precision. As they made their way back through the lines, Randall knew he would have to explain his actions and his unauthorized equipment to commanding officers who prioritized protocol and procedure over initiative and life itself. What he couldn't know was that his single act of disobedience would save not just Baker Company, but potentially the entire Bastogne perimeter, as the German patrol he had stopped was the vanguard of a much larger infiltration force poised to exploit any initial breakthrough. The aftermath of Randall's unauthorized engagement was immediate and multifaceted, moving with the chaotic speed of combat theater bureaucracy. Captain Harold Morrison, Baker Company's commander, was waiting for them when they arrived at the battalion command post. His expression was utterly unreadable. "You disobeyed direct orders," Morrison stated without preamble. "Endangered your position, potentially compromised our entire defensive strategy, and initiated engagement without authorization." Randall stood at attention, his face betraying no emotion. "Yes, sir." "You also saved my entire company," Morrison continued, his voice softening with the gravity of the truth. "The patrol you engaged was leading a battalion-strength attack force. If they had breached our perimeter undetected, we would have been overrun within minutes." Winters spoke up quickly. "Sir, Private Randall had visual confirmation of the enemy through his scope. He made a tactical judgment based on the immediate threat. Morrison's eyes narrowed with suspicion. His scope. Standard M1903A4 scopes don't function in pitch darkness, Corporal. What exactly are you saying? Randall knew the moment had arrived. The truth would either be his salvation or his destruction. He removed his modified scope from his pack and presented it to the officers. Self-developed night visibility enhancement, sir. It uses phosphorescent material to detect heat signatures against cooler backgrounds. The effect is amplified by a small ultraviolet light source. The battalion commander, Major Davis, entered the bunker just then, cutting short the tense silence. "I want to see the man who shot up a German patrol in the dark," he announced, his voice booming with curiosity and grudging respect. "And I want to know how the hell he did it." Randall had no choice but to lay out his forbidden innovation. "You built this yourself?" Major Davis asked, examining the crude device with the curiosity of a scientist. "From what?" "Salvaged material, sir. The phosphorescent paint came from captured German aircraft instruments. The ultraviolet light was adapted from a signal lamp. The filters were manufactured from medical X-ray film." "Where did you learn to do this kind of modification?" "Hunting in Minnesota, sir. My father and I developed similar techniques for tracking deer at night. The principles are the same, though the materials here are more advanced."